Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live in Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines from the region. I'm Sivan Raviv, and today is day 704 of the war in Gaza. Let's get into all the top headlines at this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu delivered a blunt and threatening message to the residents of Gaza City. The IDF is coming. Leave now. Netanyahu stressed the urgent need for Gazan residents to get out of Gaza City ahead of the approaching IDF Gaza offensive designed to capture the city and fight Hamas. Netanyahu claimed that Israel has destroyed 50 terror towers in Gaza City over the past 2 days, and that was just a prelude to what was coming if Hamas does not surrender. In a message recorded from the Israeli Air Force Operations Room, Netanyahu vowed that Israel will destroy the Hamas terror infrastructure and appeal directly to the Gazan residents. Let's take a listen.
אני הבטחתי לכם לפני ימים אחדים שאנחנו נפיל את מגדלי הטרור בעזה. זה בדיוק מה שאנחנו עושים. ביומיים האחרונים 50 מגדלים כאלה נפלו. חיל האוויר הוריד אותם. עכשיו כל זה רק מבוא, רק ספתח לפעולה העצימה העיקרית. וזה תמרון קרקעי של כוחותינו שמתארגנים עכשיו ומתכנסים לתוך העיר עזה. ולכן אני אומר לתושבי עזה, אני מנצל את ההזדמנות הזאת ותקשיבו לי טוב. ראו, הוזהרתם. צאו משם.
It's day 704 of the war in Gaza. The IDF announced the deaths of 4 soldiers who were killed in a Hamas guerrilla attack on a military outpost on the outskirts of Gaza City. The fallen troops are named as 20-year-old Staff Sergeant Uri Lamed from Tel Mond, 19-year-old Sergeant Amit Aryeh Regev from Modi'in, 20-year-old Sergeant Gadi Kotal from Kibbutz Afikim, and 21-year-old Lieutenant Matan Abramovich from Ganei Tikva. They all served with the 401st Armored Brigade's 52nd Battalion. According to a preliminary IDF probe, 3 Hamas operatives launched an attack on an army encampment in the Kafr Jabalia area on the outskirts of Gaza City's Sheikh Hadawan neighborhood. The incident took place shortly after troops had returned to the outpost following an overnight activity. According to the initial investigation, the operatives reached a tank at the entrance to the encampment and opened fire at the commander, who had his head outside the armored vehicle's open hatch. The gunmen then hurled an explosive device inside the tank, leading to the deaths of the 4 soldiers. The probe also found that other soldiers stationed in the encampment returned fire at the fleeing Hamas terrorists, with at least 2 of them being hit. Israeli officials are casting doubt tonight on the latest ceasefire proposal pushed by U.S. President Donald Trump, as Hamas insists it cannot hand over all the hostages at once. According to reports in the Saudi daily Sharq al-Awsat, Hamas told mediators that both living hostages and the bodies of those murdered cannot be returned immediately, claiming some remains are buried under rubble or in areas now controlled by the IDF. The American-backed plan, which Jerusalem has shown openness to, demands that all 48 hostages be freed on the very first day of the truce, with Washington guaranteeing Israel would not resume military operations as long as talks continue. But senior officials warn Hamas is unlikely to accept and give up the hostages, especially as the group continues to push for a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, a demand Israel says is off the table. The skepticism follows Trump's latest announcement that a Gaza deal is very close and that all hostages, living and dead, would be returned promptly. Israeli media report the proposal could include a large Palestinian prisoner release in exchange, alongside negotiations for an end to the war during the ceasefire. After a day of grief, Jerusalem has buried the victims of one of the deadliest terror attacks in Jerusalem in years. 6 Israelis were murdered and more than a dozen wounded when 2 Palestinian gunmen opened fire at a bus stop near Ramot Junction. 2 victims remain in serious condition. The Shin Bet has identified the terrorists as 21-year-old Mohammed Taha and 20-year-old Mutana Amrov, both from villages near Ramallah. Security officials say the 2 were heavily armed and had planned a large-scale massacre before being killed by Israeli forces. IDF Chief Eyal Zamir visited the scene of the attack and announced a full closure of the villages where the attackers came from. He vowed that the army will dismantle what he called terror nests across the West Bank. Overnight, Israeli forces carried out a series of raids in the Ramallah and Jenin areas, arresting suspects, seizing weapons, and confiscating terror funds worth tens of thousands of shekels. Elite of Divan unit reservists capture one operative who was plotting future attacks. Israeli officials say the deadly terrorist shooting underscores the need for relentless counter-terror operations and international recognition of the threat Israel faces daily from Palestinian terror groups. One of the victims in the Jerusalem terrorist attack is 57-year-old Rabbi Levi Yitzhak Pash, who was laid to rest in Jerusalem. Mourners gathered to honor his memory, while international leaders, including Spain, France, the European Union, and the United Arab Emirates, condemned the attack. Tensions are escalating between Jerusalem and Madrid after Israel announced sanctions against two Spanish ministers over what it calls a violent and anti-Semitic statement. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar in Israel said Spain's Deputy Prime Minister Yolanda Diaz and Youth Minister Sira Rego will be banned from entering Israel, and all official contacts with them are now cut off. Both politicians had accused Israel of genocide and openly called for boycotts and sanctions against the Jewish state in the aftermath of Hamas's October 7th massacre. Jerusalem, however, is standing firm, accusing the left-wing government in Madrid of pursuing a hostile anti-Israel line. Israeli officials stressed that incitement and hate speech from European leaders cannot be ignored, particularly as Israel continues its war against Hamas terror. Madrid responded angrily, with Foreign Minister José Manuel Álvarez recalling Spain's ambassador from Tel Aviv for consultations. He claimed Israel's actions were unacceptable and slanderous. Spain is also taking punitive action against Israel with new restrictions placed on shipping and aircraft. Let's take a listen.
El Gobierno de España ha decidido dar un paso más y poner en marcha de forma inmediata 9 acciones adicionales para detener el genocidio en Gaza, para perseguir a sus ejecutores y para apoyar a la población palestina. La primera es la aprobación urgente de un Real Decreto Ley que consolide jurídicamente el embargo de armas a Israel, que venimos aplicando ya de facto desde octubre del año 2023 y que establezca la prohibición legal y permanente de comprar y vender armamento, munición y equipamiento militar a Israel. Junto con este embargo, la prohibición del tránsito por parte o por puertos españoles a todos los barcos que transporten combustibles destinados a las Fuerzas Armadas israelíes. La tercera, la denegación de entrada al espacio aéreo español a todas aquellas aeronaves de Estado que transporten material de defensa destinado a Israel.
Meanwhile, Israel launched airstrikes in northeastern Lebanon, killing 5 people, including 4 Hezbollah members. The IDF strikes on a Hezbollah training base comes amid the terror group's refusal to disarm, with the Lebanese government demanding that it does so. Even with the ceasefire ongoing, Israel continues to hit Hezbollah targets when they are found to be in violation of understandings between Jerusalem and Beirut. These strikes in northeastern Lebanon, near Syria, far from the country's border with Israel, are quite rare. Israeli Arabic military spokesperson Avichai Adrai said their air forces targeted Hezbollah positions and infrastructure, including a training area for the group's elite Redwan forces. The facilities were used to train operatives and prepare attacks against IDF troops and Israel, including gunfire, drills, and other weapons exercises. The army said the storage of weapons and the activities of the Hezbollah terrorist organization at these sites constitute a blatant violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon and constitute a threat to the state of Israel. And now joining me to discuss the latest turn of events are political and military analyst, Major in Reserves Elliot Chodoff, and Dr. Kobby Barda, expert in American history and geostrategy at HIT Holon. Thank you both for coming and joining us. So I want to start with the latest on Hamas and where things stand on the potential hostage deal. Trump wrote on Truth Social this week that this is his last warning to Hamas. Could it actually signal urgency or seriousness of U.S. efforts? Or in other words, will he finally put his money where his mouth is? Kobby.
Okay, so basically what we need to look is the timeline of President Trump. President Trump, since assuming office, his primary goal is to achieve the Nobel Prize that he believed that he needed to get that before in his first presidency during his Abraham Accords and facilitating peace treaty between Ethiopia and Eritrea. So that is the vector in which he's trying to do the most pressing into and to receive that Nobel. So though he already been able to consolidate 5 large-scale peace agreements, starting his second terms, the world is still watching on 2 bloody battlefields. One is Gaza, and the second is Ukraine. In Ukraine, last month, he tried to do his best getting into Alaska, President Putin, but he now understands that probably there is no gain to do there. So now all eyes on Gaza, and this is why he's trying to put everything he can in the scope of that 2 or 3 weeks time to cut the deal and to be then able to present before the Nobel Prize Committee that he was able to sponsor one of the most bloodiest fight in the 21st century.
But Kobby, we certainly have heard this kind of rhetoric before from Trump when it comes to Hamas. He said they'll have hell to pay a few months ago, and I'm not sure he followed up on that in any way. So what are your thoughts on that?
He did. The problem with the perception is that people do not understand what does it mean opening the gates of hell of Trump eyes. Trump did not mean that he will send the Green Berets or the Navy SEALs to get and try to get one of the hostage back. What he is referring to open the gates of hell is in actually 2 vectors. The first one is to supply everything that Israel needs, literally everything Israel needs in terms of arms, in terms of heavy equipment, D9s, etc. And the second one is to give a diplomatic umbrella. And we saw during that period of, I think, 8 or 9 months now that President Trump is in office, that he's been taking serious measures in the diplomatic arena, such as boycotting or blocking the option of ICC prosecutors, blocking Abu Mazen to come to the UN Assembly. We see that his mouth is where his heart is, or his heart where his mouth is, and he's doing whatever he needs to do in order to help Israel. Now, Hamas is not an easy target, and they are fanatic, carried by radical Islam. So even though he's putting all of his pressure and really open the gates for hell so we can enter into that hell, that's literally what he does. He opened the gates of hell. So we will be able to carry out that mission. We still haven't been able to broker a sufficient deal that will get all the hostage back and end the war. We need to hope, that the pressure that now is trying to place on Qatar might in his turn help us in cutting a deal with Hamas.
Elliot, what do you think? Trump has made ultimatums like this before. Are they effective in your opinion?
They're not effective on Hamas. They were on a micro level along the way, but I think that as we get closer, and I agree with Kobby, we're dealing with an organization. I would put it this way. Trump's definition of hell isn't the same as Hamas's definition of hell. And he's doing what he can do, and certainly giving Israel what it needs and the green light and the cover and all of that. But Hamas isn't impressed. Hamas is a radical jihadi organization. Their interests are very different. Their willingness to suffer, and certainly for the Palestinian population in Gaza to suffer, is very high. They can take it. And for them, holding hostages, and we've seen that in their statements in the last couple of days, we'll agree with it, but we can't release all the hostages. Well, anybody who's been following Hamas isn't surprised by that. They'll say yes and then say no at the same time, saying, well, that we agreed. So Trump is doing, I think, the best he can. I think his repeating this is the last chance degrades some of that in terms of a threat. But the last chance here is basically being dictated or determined by Israel. If the IDF, if when the IDF makes this into a major operation, it started with the bombing of the buildings in Gaza and other smaller operations, then the time has run out. In other words, the clock has basically run out, and Trump knows it. I think he takes Israel at its word.
Now, Kobby, just like Elliot says, Hamas has so far said they cannot locate all the hostages, living and dead. What do you make of that? Could it be true, or is it just a manipulation like we suspect?
Well, we know that they know where the living are because they need to supply them with food, right? So I would argue that separating a deal that starts with getting all the, we hope, 20 live, and then after something been made by Israel, then the dead will be returned. This is something that can make sense in the looking of the greater willing, if you want, that we want to see that deal happen. By the way, Trump said numerous times that he is kind of shocked how much it is important, the bodies to the families in Israel. He said sometimes it's just the same or even more than when I talk with people that with families that have their hostage alive there. So I think that in that aspect, the understanding that some of them might be under places that they don't know where it is. We have to remember not all the hostage were under Hamas hand. There are some of them that were under different organization terror, and so it might take some time to liaison all of it, but I hope that this is the only thing that remains if we'll come into a concrete deal, then this is something that I believe most of the Israelis will be able to carry that on.
But Elliot, how could they possibly agree to return all the hostages, Hamas that is? Those hostages are regretfully a card they hold dear to them for survival.
Yes, I've been saying for many months, and I'm certainly not the only one, that it's unlikely that they're going to release the last hostages. As I said earlier, they won't say no, they'll say we can't, and they'll come up with all sorts of reasons that they can't, whether it's because they can't find them or they can't get to them or whatever. And I agree with Kobby, they know where they are, but they can play as if they don't. And that puts Israel and the United States, but particularly Israel, in the horns of a dilemma. What happens if, when they say, yes, we'll return all 20, but we can only find 15 of them? Does Israel say no? Or does it say, okay, let's go ahead with this, and in effect, agree to a full deal, but not receive it in the end? Hamas knows how to play this game. They are excellent negotiators. They know exactly what hurts Israel, and they do need those hostages for their own needs. This is not about prisoner exchange or hostage for prisoner exchange to get people out of prison. That terrorists, that's their statement. The real reason for them holding the hostages is for them to have that guarantee that Israel doesn't go in full scale into its military operations. And they learned that from many cases, Gilad Shalit in particular, and they're continuing to play the same game, the same card, playing on Israeli psychological issues that are legitimate. I mean, people want their family members home. Israel wants hostages home, and Absolutely. They're going to play that to the hilt. And I agree. I don't see them giving up all of them in the end.
Now, just to remind the audience that Gilad Shalit was traded in for 1,027 terrorists who were in Israeli jails. These are 1,027 for just the one soldier, the one hostage. Now we're talking about a whole lot more. Israel responded positively, though, to the Trump deal. If Hamas rejects or plays these kind of games, are we looking at an escalation in the war, Elliot, or is there still diplomatic wiggle room, in your opinion?
There's always diplomatic wiggle room, but once this planned operation goes into full scale, which it's not ready to do in the next few days, it'll escalate over the next few days. And I think that escalation is part of the pressure on Hamas and others. There's certainly a military reason behind doing it, but as the great German strategist Clausewitz said, war is an extension of policy by additional means. Policy and war go hand in hand. So it's not simply military, it's military within a political context. If it forces Hamas to turn around and truly to the table, it can be turned off. But there is a point of no return. In other words, if enough force is already in full-scale operation in Gaza City, and Hamas then wakes up one morning and says, oh no, now it's time to stop, it could be too late for that. When that will happen, that a lot has to do with actual operations on the ground and how far in and how successful the operations are.
And Kobby, speaking of Israeli openness to the deal terms, would Netanyahu actually be ready to end the war, withdraw its troops completely at the end of this? Is that the right thing for Israel?
So as you said it earlier when you asked, they already did. So Israel is now willing to accept the Trump deal. And I believe that eventually, as polls indicating, the vast majority of the people of Israel are willing to go a long way in order to get the hostage back. It's very important for restarting the community that we hear, and people are willing to pay heavy price, numerous of thousands of people maybe, to release from jail and whatever that it takes. And I think that eventually there's the time frame of the Netanyahu war, because we do need to remember that right after the holidays, around mid-October, the Knesset is getting back to session, and this time with only 50-something, 51 or 52 members of the coalition, and it is very hard to keep things going. So I do believe, on top of everything we mentioned regarding Trump, I think that for Netanyahu, it's also essential to try to wrap it up with the deal that eventually will get all of the people out of Hamas hands and say, we're now going to election, and I was the one who've been able to both make Gaza to rubbles and get all of the Israelis back. This is a card that he might try to play, because remember, his political analytics of the way he looks at the game field is now different than the one he left the summer session. It is something completely different now. I don't see how he will be able to come up with a law that is suiting for the ultra-Orthodox in that war as well. He has a serious problem with his budget. He needs to look into the horizon, and I think for him it's also a big gain if he will be able to get everyone back home.
Are there international pressures which might be driving this deal forward now as opposed to before?
There is the international UN assembly that are looking to approve the Palestinian state. This is something that the countries that are trying to promote that, trying to put some pressure on Israel. At least as much as we can see, as long as Trump stand fully behind Israel, then it is only remain as a declaration, but not as actual diplomacy, because the US can always veto that. And this is why might be very frustrating. We see that in many vectors, starting from art, sports, commerce, you name it. So myself, I am in the academia, and I see some of my colleagues that are going to conferences and students getting into their conferences and shouting and interfere and etc. So the whole atmosphere that the Israeli society is here is with something that is putting a lot of pressure back on the government, because we get to feel that sense from many avenues of life. So the European, some of the Western countries as well, do try to promote that by pressuring the government in Israel. Eventually, it works to a limited extent.
Well, Kobby Barda and Elliot Chodoff, thank you very much for this valuable input.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Dr. Batya Jaffe is from United Hatzalah Psychotrauma and Crisis Response Unit. Thank you for speaking to us. I'd really love to hear about what this unit is about, especially in light of the terrorist attack that we saw yesterday in Jerusalem. I know you were involved and you were on site. Please tell me what this unit is about.
Sure. The Psychotrauma Unit came out as an idea to provide mental health stabilization, terrorist attacks, and big crisis. It's a genius idea because we're dispatched at the same time that ambulances and first responders are dispatched. So we arrive at the scene of the crisis, and the idea is to stabilize the people that experienced or saw the crisis in order for them to come back to their regular lives without any complications and hopefully
may I intro lang?
lacking
Sorry.
PTSD in the future.
I understand. And can you tell me about your experience yesterday in the terrorist attack?
Sure. So I am part of the psychotrauma unit with my dog, Bella. She's a therapy dog, and we've been through extensive learning and experience to provide this first mental health stabilization. Yesterday was a very complicated scene with treating a lot of people that were witnesses to the terror attack. Also people that experienced a lot of trauma and shock from the crisis. I'm not talking only about the people that were around the bus stop, but also the first responders, the police. Everyone there experienced really complicated stuff.
It was a deadly attack. We know that 6 people were murdered, many others injured. And of course, a lot of the injuries were psychotrauma injuries, the emotional component of all of this. Can you tell us about the different sorts of traumas and reactions to difficult and tragic events, or maybe give me examples even from yesterday?
Of course. So first of all, we treated for around 33 people with anxiety attacks, really tough ones. But also there's it really depends on the person. There is this person that is very loud and you can see the attack and you can, it really brings attention to everyone that they're experiencing a hardship. On the other hand, you can find a lot of people that are just sitting around the corner, very silent, and it's really easy to miss them. And they also have need help from us. 7 out of the 33 had to be mefunim to the hospitals. Evacuated, right? And the rest we were able to help at scene.
So what you mentioned, if I understand correctly, is that there are those people on site that, are in very expressive, perhaps in hysteria or panic attacks. And then there are those who are silent, who you may find, sitting or standing in a corner somewhere, but they are also very much affected.
Right, exactly.
Now, you treated a boy yesterday and someone who you mentioned refused to get off the bus after the shooting attack. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. I don't want to go into details, but yes, I treated various people with different symptoms. There were some that were very apathic and didn't feel anything at the moment while describing really hard scenes. On the other side, were there these ones that were almost about to faint and really couldn't stand up by themselves. So really the trauma, the shock, the hysteria can really affect even the body itself.
Well, Dr. Batya Jaffe, thank you very much for your valuable work and for everything that you do, and thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.
Now, that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching, and stay safe.